And we are back here live from AWS Sydney Summit here at glorious Darling Harbour. It's been an awesome day so far, Innovation Day today, Dr. Pete.
Am I not wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very fortunate actually to have one of our customers and strong partners in the form of Atlassian here, represented by Brad Baker. Brad, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Brad, maybe we'll actually start. I mean, I think every developer who's worth their salt would know who Atlassian is, but it might be a good idea to talk about, who is Atlassian, where did you come from, and what's your role at Atlassian?
So I've been there for quite a long time. I'm just coming up to 12 years, and I worked on our premiership Jira. Everybody knows Jira. In fact, more people know Jira than they know Atlassian.
Just in case they don't know what Jira is, what is Jira in like a snappy, 5-second elevator pitch?
Jira is a collaborative way to track your work.
Awesome.
So traditionally software, but more and more all teams actually like tracking their work and knowing where they're up to and so forth.
Awesome. And what about your role at Atlassian?
So I'm a software architect, and sort of grown up into that position from developer, senior developer, and so forth. And recently I've swapped into a more platform role, so actually providing the tools to our developers and our product teams and so forth.
Right.
So after many years in product, I'm moving into platform.
Awesome. So obviously got a great familiarity of Atlassian, and then also specifically on a particular topic. You had a lightning talk just earlier on GraphQL.
Yeah, so my pet, that I keep telling everybody is all about GraphQL and as a style of API, as a way to build systems and as a way to get data. And I'm happy to talk about it for as long as possible, but they'll only give me 10 minutes.
Let's have some fun. So why
GraphQL in 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, so we'll keep it really snappy, but why do you like GraphQL? What's so magical about it that it's different to other API mechanisms and ways of doing code?
It boils down to a few things, and one of the big things is what we call underfetching and overfetching. Yep. So in traditional APIs today, you have to make multiple calls. So you say, I want this, I want the issues, I want the comments. And so you've effectively overfetched, right? You've had to make more calls than you needed. And at the same time, you've underfetched. At the same time, you can actually overfetch. You say, well, I got back this data and I don't need 3/4 of it. But I have no choice, right? Totally. The GraphQL API pattern is all about specifying what you want. It builds a sort of graph of data and so forth, and you get what you want, and it really helps around latency, and if you reduce latency in things like AWS, in your Lambdas and so forth, you pay for airtime, and so you reduce costs, and so on. So
less chatty or more chatty when needed, you pay for what you use.
Yes, and this is why mobile teams especially love it, because they're really conscious of chattiness across slower networks, across radio networks and so forth.
Totally.
And so, they've been the adopters that are driving this kind of thing.
Is there any specific use cases you maybe can take us through, or where this would be really applicable? Maybe some of the challenges around GraphQL?
Yeah, like web front ends, mobile and so on are really lay down misere on trying to adopt this sort of patterns. Some system-to-system stuff, less so. But you talked about challenges, and some of those are around the operational aspects. REST as a principle is now 19 years old.
Totally.
And the tooling and the practices and the general shared understanding of that are there, that URLs equal business practices, status codes equals the health of your system and so forth. And GraphQL challenges those, and so there's sort of challenges around that. You have to start doing things like field tracking instead of URL tracking. You have to start doing error tracking instead of just HTTP status code tracking, because you need insights into your system. You need to say, what is my performance like? What is it costing me to give me these queries and so forth? Some of those you get for free today through the sort of mature tools.
So if I put
my
I'm a lazy developer hat, I don't like change. Why would I want to learn that extra abstraction? What's the benefit for me? Is it just because I'm going to have a fewer chattier apps on my mobile client front end?
I think the big thing is, we're building consumer grade experiences now, right? And they need to be fast. And so you have to come up with techniques to say, I want some data and I need it to be fast. And this is what GraphQL has this real major advantage over. It's composable. There's a whole bunch of longer term stuff, but to me it's about being fast, being able to produce a consumer grade experience, and then people take on your apps and so on, and clients and so forth.
Right. And so what about some of the problems you have seen over the course of using GraphQL? Now, can you maybe talk us through a very specific problem maybe that you're working on now that GraphQL can address? Or,
Well, actually it's more about the operational things that I wanted to bring up, which was our security teams are obsessed with security, and they want the ability to see what happens after an incident, who got access to what calls were made, and so on. Things like access logs give you that inherently today, and you'll start to lose some of that if you naively go into your GraphQL API.
Right.
And so you need to adopt some patterns around that to get, post-fact security examination and so forth, right? One of the things that we say is have a gateway, get this thing done for you automatically. Whether you go and run your own gateways off the shelf, or you go to something like AWS AppSync, and sort of effectively buy a managed service gateway.
Sure.
You want to have those things because otherwise you'll be running blind.
So what is AppSync? Obviously, you guys use a lot of AWS services.
Yeah, so we're not personally using AppSync. I'm really interested in it. I do a lot of work in the GraphQL space in the open source sense. And it's a really interesting idea, right? You wind together a series of resolvers, you define your type system, and then you go off to AWS data sources or off to your own REST or new data sources,
backends, yep.
or even your own GraphQL behind that. So
Totally.
yeah, it's an interesting pattern, and it's sort of like higher level lambdas is the way I think about it, with a GraphQL flavour on top of it.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So you've given us a good overview on GraphQL. What about your Lightning talk specifically? Is there anything else that you really covered there that you'd like the audience to know about?
Look, I mean, I really it's about going in at eyes wide open because the operational concerns of your system are equally as important as the building the API and giving off this set of data. You need to have insight. You need to which fields are the fastest, which fields are the slowest. Where have we got our integration problems? You need that data around, and some of that dries up if you just use what you have today.
Right.
So really it was about going into that eyes wide open and making sure you're considering those operational aspects of your services that you're trying to build out.
That's a great point. Operational impact is something that people often forget when they're building applications. They're too busy launching features and services.
Right.
And operationally, it's kind of gets you later on, right?
Yeah, exactly. And with enough scale, like Atlassian ends up building scale-based applications that 30% of our effort might be operational rather than building out new features and so forth.
Awesome.
So it's a real cost and it's a real thing to be concerned about. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wrap up soon. But any reasons why I wouldn't want to use GraphQL?
There's don't go and rewrite the world just because it's cool and new, right? Service to service, there's an interesting, there's still an argument about when two services under the covers are talking to each other about, this is a mechanism and whether it's really offering you the value. So, you've got to apply that value prop on that to do it. I wouldn't say you should not use it, but I wouldn't say that it's like begging to be used like it is in sort of other scenarios.
Got it.
So Brad, we actually got a question from our audience. Do you mind taking the question?
Sure.
And before I ask the question, a big shout out to our LinuxConf members and audience there. Great to see you join in.
Yep.
But Brad, we've got a question from last week in AWS, and that person asks, does GraphQL lend itself to offline storage and sync better than REST? Or is there no relationship?
Great question.
It's a good thing to try and have a go at. It is no relationship. It is a API style.
Yeah.
There are some interesting techniques that are happening on the front end now. So I've seen some things around React and right in those front end layers that are sort of using a GraphQL structure to represent their offline state and so forth.
So local storage,
local storage and so forth.
Later. Yeah.
But honestly, they're API styles. And really it's not related to that, to be honest.
Okay. And so we've got a couple more minutes left, Brad, and I think a lot of people that are listening would like to know how they can get started. So, can you maybe tell your story in 1 minute or less of how someone that's worked in a lot of the other environments in Atlassian, Jira, like for example, and it got an interest in GraphQL and became that expert? Yeah, look, it was about trying to provide faster experiences. Some of our apps aren't as fast as they could be, and so we started investigating ways of saying, well, I need to get this data, what was it? And that sort of led me to this.
Awesome.
We had this what I call smooshed REST, where you sort of make a call, tell me what I want, and it all just comes back, and there's not a lot of structure to it,
right.
So I wanted a similar behaviour, but I wanted to have it, more defined, right, according to a better set of rules and specs and so forth. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for that insight.
All right,
it was
cheers.
very informative. I definitely learned a lot on GraphQL, especially being an infrastructure man myself. So very, very fascinating, and hopefully you out there learn a bit as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming,
Cheers.
and keep watching, guys. There's a lot more stuff coming your way. We'll be
And
back shortly.
Remember the questions.